Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Zak McCullar. Jonathan Bentley not here today. You're watching the PrepZone show presented by Bevel State. First week of high school football is in the books here in the Wallwin, and it was a great week. On Thursday night, Cordova takes down Oatman 27-20. The Blue Devils jumped out to a 27-6 lead before Oatman fought back. Tyler Thomas scored 2 touchdowns, was leading his team down the field to score another, but a fumble with 30 seconds left at the Cordova 10-yard line, recovered by Cordova's Chesley Harbison, cost Oatman the ball game, and so Cordova emerges victorious there, starting out 1-0. Last year, of course, they went 1-9, so this triple option offensive attack that they've brought in starting to work out very well for them. We'll see if they can keep it going. Moving into Friday night's games, Minor beat Dora 46-0. Of course, Minor, they're in 6A, Dora's in 4A, so the Bulldogs a little bit outmatched and fall short against Minor. Then Jasper took down Brookwood 41-6, which, there's no surprise in that. Brookwood went 0-10 last year. This is a Jasper team that's destined to do great things. Vikings jumped out 41-0, and then when the Vikings had all their backups in Brookwood, the Panthers put up a late touchdown to make it 41-6. And then an upset in a big rivalry, Curry taking down Carbon Hill 36-14 up at Travis Hudson Stadium. And Curry jumped out to a 29-0 lead. Bunch of teams jumped out early this week and then, had to hang on. Carbon Hill scored a couple of touchdowns in the fourth quarter before Curry put it away with a late touchdown, less than a minute to go, to make it 36-14. Really, the player of the game for Curry was Heath Miller. He had, 128 total yards, 2 touchdowns, also kicked a 37-yard field goal and an interception. And as he led his team, Curry, to a victory. Curry, like Cordova, breaking out an option attack that the Carbon Hill defense could not stop. Although I will say, Carbon Hill, they had their chances. The game was closer than the score indicates because Carbon Hill was in the red zone 4 times, only managed 1 touchdown on those drives. And they fall short. This week, they both have winnable games, and we'll see how they respond to the big rivalry, but we'll get into that in a minute. Corner beats Winfield 34-20. The Yellow Jackets returning a lot of talent from last year. Winfield lost a lot of seniors, so they're bound to be down this year. And Corner wins, although Winfield fought. And give credit to the Pirates. They were up 20-13 before Corner just took the game over in the fourth quarter. And we saw that from Corner a lot last year, where they would just take the game over in the fourth quarter after being down or being close. And it looks like they're back at it again. But a good start for the Yellow Jackets. And then an upset in a rivalry game once again. Addison taking down number 8 Winston County. Addison was up 21-0 and then held on for a 41-20 victory. The Bulldogs under first-year head coach Mark Hastings, they're primed to do great things. Winston County falling just short in that one. Obviously, they were ranked. Not anymore. They fell out of the rankings, but they have a chance this week with Meek. We'll see how that goes. And then final game, speaking of Meek, the Tigers beat Lynn 20-6, avenging last year's loss. It was tied late in the third quarter, but a pick 6 by Brody Baxter put the Tigers in front, and it was a lead that they would never relinquish. So Meek beats their rival, and they moved to 1-0 on the season. Our player of the week was Lincoln Smothers, the quarterback from Jasper. His stat line is nothing short of impressive. 9 of 13 passing, 222 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He ran the ball 4 times for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 357 total yards and 4 touchdowns. He took the game over, leads his team to a dominant win over the Brookwood Panthers. Congratulations to Lincoln Smothers for being our player of the week. Runners up, Spencer Unruh for corner, 26 rushing attempts, 212 yards, and 3 touchdowns. His teammate C.J. Brown with 13 tackles, 2 of which were for loss. Heath Miller at Curry, who I mentioned, with his 128 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. He also had the 37-yard field goal and the interception in the end zone, which stopped what was probably going to be a Carbon Hill scoring drive. Then we go to Aiden Benson for Meek, who had 3 sacks with 8 tackles in their win over Lynn. Elijah Roberts and Seth Hammock, both for Addison, combined for 296 yards and 6 total touchdowns in their dominant win over Winston County. And so really good for them, had great weeks. And now into the power rankings, the top 5 teams of the week. And my power rankings pretty much unchanged from last week. Cordova is moving into the 5th spot, led by Titan Ledbetter, their fullback, who had a great game against Oakman. Their triple option attack that they implemented worked very well, and so Cordova's bound for success until teams figure it out. And the question is, do teams figure it out? Because the option is something you don't see a whole lot anymore, and maybe it'll keep working. And Cordova, Jonathan last week said that one of his bold predictions was that they would make the playoffs, and if they keep playing like they did last week, that could legitimately happen. Number 4 is Meek. They were my 4 team last week. They remain there again after beating Lynn. Number 3, I've got Addison, who moved to number 10 in Class 1A this week. Number 2, I have Corner. They moved to number 10 in 5A. And then number 1 will be Jasper once again. They were my number 1 last week, dominated against Brookwood, which we expected, and they remain the number 1 team. Now we'll get into Week 2 games. Colbert Heights is traveling to take on Carbon Hill. So the Colbert Heights Wildcats, they defeated Cherokee last week 38-8. Cherokee, not that great. They're middle of the road in 1A. So I really don't know a lot about Colbert Heights. And Carbon Hill's coming off of kind of a disheartening loss to their biggest rival. And so we'll see how Carbon Hill responds to that. But I know that Carbon Hill, there's 2 ways to go after losing big to your rivals. You either fall apart or you pull up your britches and keep going. And, from everything I've heard, Carbon Hill's going to do the latter. And so I think that they're going to fight hard, and I think they're going to play well. I think this is going to be a great game. I'm picking Colbert Heights, but I would not be surprised if Carbon Hill, kept it close and maybe pulled an upset. Second game, Hale County coming in to take on Oatman, a battle of the Wildcats. Of course, last year, Hale County beat Oatman 54-27. And Oatman, they're coming off of a disheartening loss to a rival just like Carbon Hill. And we'll see how they respond to that. Of course, they've got the 1 extra day of rest compared to Hale County. But Hale County, in their first week, they lost to Hamilton 42-13. So maybe Hale County's not as good as they were last week. We'll find out. But I'm going with the Wildcats of Hale County in this one. I think they're just going to have too much on offense, even though we didn't see it last week. I think Hale County will still have a potent offense this season, and I think Oatman becomes the first victim of that. The next game, Curry going to Cold Springs. And look, Curry's got themselves a really good team this year. I was impressed by the way they played Friday night against Carbon Hill. But Cold Springs, usually they're in 2A. Usually they're not that good. Last year they went 5-6, made the playoffs, lost in the first round to Winston County, and they started off the season by beating Hanceville, a 3A team, 65-7. And I get it, Hanceville's not that great. They went 1-9 last year, but still, beating anybody 65-7 is impressive. So I'm going to go with Cold Springs in that one, but close. I think if this was your normal year for Cold Springs where they were always down, I would have picked Curry. But because I think Cold Springs is in store for some good things this year, I'm going with the Eagles in that one, but close. Next up is Northside. Speaking of disappointing, they were disappointing last year, but they started this year off right, beating West Blockton 56-6. An impressive win for the Rams. And Cordova, they're coming off the big win. And I think the biggest disadvantage for Cordova in this one is that Northside, they've seen the film. They know that Cordova is going to come out with the option, and so they'll be prepared for it. I still think Cordova is going to do a good job of scoring points, and I think the defense is going to hold Northside. But this being at Northside, I'm going with the Rams close. Now, the Jasper Vikings, they're hosting Sipsey Valley. I had to do some research on Sipsey Valley. They are the Bears. They're located in Buell, Alabama. Last week, they beat Greene County 69-6. Of course, Greene County's in 2A. Sipsey Valley, I think, is in 4A. They're coming to Jasper, and look, they're fantastic this season, and I think Sipsey Valley is just another victim of the Vikings. So I'm going with Jasper pretty big in that one. Next up is an interesting matchup, Hackleburg at Lynn. Last year, Lynn and Hackleburg met twice, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs, and the Panthers won both games. This year they have to go to Lynn in the regular season. Lynn, they're coming off of their loss to Meek. Hackleburg last week was off, so we have not seen anything from them. And from what I'm hearing, they're going to be a little down this year, Hackleburg, but not by a lot. So I'm expecting good things out of Hackleburg, and I think that the Panthers will win their region. It's the region that contains Addison and Meek, so there's going to be some competition from both of those schools for Hackleburg to deal with. But in this one, I say they're going to beat Lynn, but I think it'll be a good game about 3 quarters in, and then Hackleburg will probably score a few touchdowns to make it look like a bigger blowout than it was. We'll see that, though. That game is Thursday night, by the way, at Lynn, so if you have nothing else going on, come down and see that. Lynn always has a great atmosphere. They always put on a good show. They've got usually have a good team, so we'll see how they do there. Next up, another good matchup, Addison going to Decatur Heritage. Of course, last year the Bulldogs upset Decatur Heritage This year it would not be much of an upset. Addison, they're ranked 10th. Decatur Heritage, they had a rough week last year, lost 70-36 to Sheffield. Interestingly, Decatur Heritage, although they're usually very good, they've never beaten Addison. The Bulldogs are 3-0 against the Eagles, and I'm thinking that they're going to stay 4-0. So I'm going with Addison just because I think there'll be a lot of Seth Hammock, a lot of Eli Roberts. So I think it's going to be a good game for Addison. Going to Decatur, I don't think the Eagles stand a chance. I'm picking Addison. Next up is a big rivalry, Corner at Dora, the county line clash. The Yellow Jackets ranked 10th. Dora coming off of the loss to Minor. And I'm going to go with Corner here, although Dora leads the all-time series 31-16-2. So my math says this is the 50th meeting that they've had all time. So definitely cool there. I love rivalries. They're what makes part of this sport so special. And I think Corner wins this one pretty handily. Next up, and the final game we have going on, Meek at Winston County. Winston County coming off the loss to Addison, Meek coming off the win to Lynn. So it looks like two teams that are going in opposite directions, but Winston County, they're going to be focused, so they'll play as hard as they can against Meek, and it's at Winston County. So I think it'll be a great game, but I just see too much Hunter Wyatt for Meek in this one. Hunter Wyatt, he has the capability to take over football games, and I think that's what we're going to see this Friday night. So I am going with the Tigers to wrap up all of our high school games for this week. Now, college football starts this week. Last week, there were a couple of matchups, one in Dublin, Iowa State, Kansas State, but no real football there. The SEC wasn't in action. And we're going to start off with our two local teams, Alabama and Auburn. And both teams have playoff possibilities for this season. Alabama, we're used to it. This is an Alabama team that's bringing back almost everybody from last year, so everybody kind of expected they'd compete for a playoff spot. But for Auburn, looking at their schedule, it's not that tough. They do have a couple of road trips, like they have to go to Oklahoma, they have to go to Vanderbilt, they have to go to Texas A&M. That could get rough for the Tigers. But their two biggest rivals and their two best opponents they play are at home, Georgia and Alabama, and you know how Jordan-Hare Stadium is when a good team comes in. So, Auburn, their schedule is manageable for an SEC schedule, and I think they have a chance to go 9-3 this year perhaps and compete for a playoff spot. Of course, all of that hinges on whether Jackson Arnold clicks at quarterback. Arnold, he had a great game last year against Alabama. Other than that, he was spotty. He was benched, missed a few games. So, does he turn it around with the change of scenery? Maybe. He was supposed to be the next guy at Oklahoma, but it really didn't work out for him. Of course, Oklahoma has that long history of good quarterbacks, and he transferred out, much like Spencer Rattler a few years ago. He went to South Carolina and was really good. So we'll see if Arnold can do the same thing and transition into a traditional SEC school. Of course, Arnold got his first taste of the SEC last year in Oklahoma's debut season. And for Alabama, I mentioned they've got everybody coming back. So you've got Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard making a great wide receiver duo. Throw Miami transfer Isaiah Horton into the mix, and Alabama has a formidable receiving core. The defense is bringing back a lot of talent from last year, like Deontay Lawson. Almost the entire secondary is coming back. The defensive line will be anchored by L.T. Overton and Tim Keenan, who were really good last year. So this is an Alabama team that they've got it all right where they want it. The offensive line, Caden Proctor's back. Jaden Roberts is back, although it's said he might miss the Florida State game with a concussion, so we'll see how that goes. The only question for Alabama is at quarterback. They lose Jalen Milroe, which, listen, Milroe struggled down the stretch last year. He was not the Milroe you saw against Georgia. He was not the Milroe you saw last year leading Alabama to wins down the stretch. And I think most Alabama fans, myself included, are glad that he's with Seattle, he's in the NFL. You can start fresh with a new quarterback, and that's what Ty Simpson is. He's coming in. He won the starting job. So Simpson, he's got all the weapons he needs. Of course, at running back, and I was going to bring this up, running back, there are some question marks for the Tide. Jim Miller's going to be hurt with a collarbone. He'll miss the first 3 games of the season against Florida State, ULM, and Wisconsin. So it's going to be next man up in the backfield, and who takes over? Justice Haynes. He transferred to Michigan. You can't rely on him because he's up with the Wolverines this year, and so Richard Young, he has the most carries of anybody left, and he only appeared in a couple of games last year. Of course, Danny Hill is also coming back. He appeared against Mercer last year. That was it that we saw of him. Then there's Louisiana transfer Draymond Washington. Those are young backs, high recruits that people thought were going to thought highly of, thought they were going to have great careers. But now they're pushed into the spotlight before they're ready, perhaps. So we'll see how the running game fares against Florida State. And going down to Doak Campbell Stadium to start it off, it's a great atmosphere. And we'll see with a young running back core, young quarterback, how that goes. Now we're going to go into Zach's picks. Auburn is going to Baylor Friday night. Auburn, they're going to have a great passing attack. I mean, they've got a new quarterback in Jackson Arnold, who I think he's going to have a good season this year, better than last year. At wide receiver, you have Eric Singleton, the Georgia Tech transfer, and sophomore Cam Coleman, who's going to form a great duo at wideout. So this is an Auburn team that's going to have a great passing game. The defense has Keldrick Falk. He's being rumored as maybe the first pick overall next year, or at least the first defensive pick in the NFL draft for 2026. And Baylor, I mean, it's the Big 12. Baylor, they have some talent, but they could compete for the conference, but they'd be an outside chance. It's at Waco, so that's an advantage for Baylor. But I'm going to go with Auburn. I mean, I think that the Tigers, I think they're in for a special season. And I mean that. I'm putting undue expectations on them maybe. I know a lot of people might roll their eyes and say, what has Auburn shown us the past few years? And the answer is, well, not really anything. They haven't had a good season since 2019. But I think this could be the year they turn that around. So I'm picking the Tigers to win Friday night. Now the main 3 Saturday games in the SEC. The big one that morning, Texas at Ohio State, number 1 versus number 3. And the big storyline here is quarterbacks. Ohio State, they're starting a redshirt freshman in Julian Sayin, the Alabama transfer, who, Sayin was supposed to be the next man at Alabama. He was supposed to be the next great quarterback. When Saban retires, he leaves and goes to Columbus. And so his first ever start is coming against the number 1 team in the country. And then with Texas, everybody knows who the Texas starting quarterback is. It's going to be Arch Manning, Archie's grandson, the nephew of Peyton and Eli, both of whom won a couple of Super Bowls apiece. So it's in the bloodline for Arch Manning, and he had a couple of starts last year, did very well when Quinn Ewers was hurt. So there's a lot of expectations for him. So I'm going to pick Texas in this one. I think that they're going to go to the horseshoe, and I think they're going to win and probably reclaim some pride for the SEC, considering the Big Ten. They've won the last 2 championships. It's been 3 years since the SEC had a team even make the national championship game. And that would have been Georgia when they beat TCU. So the SEC, they've lost some of the pride. The Big Ten is now the premier conference in college football. And so hopefully this game will go a little way in bringing that back to the SEC where it belongs. The next game at 2:30 Saturday, Alabama going to Florida State, the number 8 Crimson Tide, encountering a hostile environment to start this season. Of course, Alabama, they don't usually open the season with road trips. Usually it's either a neutral site or it's at home. In fact, the last time they went on a real road trip to start the season was 2020, of course, with the pandemic against Missouri. Before that, man, you have to go back a long way when the last time they started a game at somebody else's place, if they started the season at somebody else's place. So this is uncharted territory for the Crimson Tide, taking on a Florida State team that went 2-10 last year, after going 13-1, thinking they should have made the playoffs over Alabama. And then last year, the bottom falls out. So Mike Norvell is coaching for his life for Florida State. And so is Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. He knows, last year you go 9-4. People will kind of give you a pass because you didn't have the team you wanted. Your quarterback you inherited, he struggled. The defense was really good. So people gave him some grace for that. This year, he has to win. He cannot afford to lose the first game of the season at a Florida State team that's not even ranked, not even close to being ranked. So these are 2 coaches that are fighting for their jobs in 2 different ways. And I think Alabama is going to have too much offensive firepower because of Ryan Grubb coming in as offensive coordinator. And so I think the Crimson Tide are going to win. Of course, speaking of offensive coordinators, Florida State, they have a new offensive coordinator named Gus Malzahn, who everybody remembers was the head coach at Auburn. So it could be a high-scoring matchup. But when it's high-scoring, whichever defense can make just a few more stops will win. And I think Alabama's defense has the capability to do that. Last year, the 4-2-5, which people complained about at the beginning of the season, it really clicked and it started working. And Kane Womack, he caught a lot of grief against Vanderbilt, first loss of the season, where they allowed 40 points. Vanderbilt, ran all over him, and then he really turned it around. So I think that he'll continue that momentum that he had late last season on defense into this year. Alabama will make just enough stops to keep Florida State from scoring, and the Crimson Tide will win. Then the second of 3 top 10 matchups this weekend, LSU going to Clemson. And this is an interesting matchup. Of course, LSU, they call their home stadium Death Valley. Clemson does the same. In the offseason, Brian Kelly, the head coach for LSU, made fun of Clemson, saying, "You're not the real Death Valley. We'll show you what the real Death Valley is." Well, you have to go to Clemson. I mean, why would you say that if you're Brian Kelly ahead of going to Clemson? You know that the Clemson Tigers are going to be motivated. Their team's going to be motivated. The fans especially are going to be motivated. And so I think Clemson is going to beat LSU very handily. I think LSU, people are saying they have a chance to make the playoffs with Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. Honestly, I haven't seen anything out of Garrett Nussmeier that makes me think that he could lead his team to the playoffs. Last year he had his moments, but he also had his struggles. And I think it's going to be the same this year. So LSU, I think, loses very handily. I don't think this is a good season for them. And I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Kelly is dismissed as head coach by the time this season reaches its end. Our final game to pick, Notre Dame going to Miami, number 6 Fighting Irish, number 10 Hurricanes for the third top 10 matchup of this opening week. And it's a great opening week, too, of college football. You don't see 3 top 10 matchups first week of the season, but that's what we have here. Notre Dame, they're breaking in a new quarterback, Carson Carr, who's a redshirt freshman. Meanwhile, Miami breaking in a new quarterback of their own, but he's a little more experienced. Carson Beck, the Georgia transfer, who after being injured to end last season, didn't really play well this season. He said, "I'm going to the NFL." Georgia fans were like, "Good, we're glad you're gone." Well, then he pulls out of the NFL draft and goes to Miami. And obviously, Georgia fans were not pleased by that. Some Miami fans were, some weren't, considering what he did at Georgia last year was very inconsistent. But I think that his experience as quarterback is what's going to give his team the advantage, not to mention home field advantage. So I'm picking Miami to beat Notre Dame in this one. Well, folks, that's going to do it for the Prep Zone show. I'd like to thank Bevel State for sponsoring us once again this season. Thanks to Jake Aaron, our producer. And this is Zak McCullar saying so long. God bless you. Until next week.